In this exercise, we're going to use a two-dimensional array to represent a deck of playing cards. And we'll do that by having the rows represent the suits. So we'll have 4 suits, and then we'll have the columns represent the ranks of cards. And that can either be from 2 to ace or ace to king, depending on whether you play ace high or low. That would be up to the person implementing the program. All we're going to worry about here is the actual representation itself. So we'll start out by creating a few functions. First, you'll notice that I've included the libraries we need for random number generation. We'll use those libraries a little bit later. First thing we want to do is write a function to initialize the deck of cards. So to do that, I'm going to provide 2 parameters. The first parameter is the two-dimensional array. And notice that when we use a two-dimensional array as a function parameter, we have to provide the column number or the number of columns in the array. And that's opposed to the way we did it with the one-dimensional array, where we didn't have to provide any information at all in the actual parameter for the array. Then we also have to provide the number of rows, since that information is not in the first parameter. The actual function itself, we just loop through the elements of the array. Let's use R instead of I for that. We loop through the rows and columns of the array, setting each position equal to a 0. And so we'll use a nested for loop for that. C less than 13, since we don't have a parameter for that, and then plus plus C. And then the body of the inner loop is simply ARRR sub C equals 0. Close off the function definition, and we're finished with the initDeck function. Now let's create a function to display the deck after we have created it. I just see one thing I did wrong up here. Let me fix that real quick. InitDeck is a void function. Obviously, there's no return statement for that, so it's a void function. DisplayDeck looks very similar to initDeck, and so much so that I'm going to copy the body and then make the changes that I need to make in the copied body from the previous function. So we'll add that in. We need to tab the outer for loop over a bit. There we go. And inside the body, what we're going to do is, this outer loop is going to be a multi-line body, so we need an open brace there. The inner loop will consist of a cout statement where we display each element of the array, the R, the C, followed by a space. And then right here at this level, we also want to have a cout end line so that we have a new line after each row or suit. So here we're going to close off the outer for, and that's all we have to do for DisplayDeck. Now we're ready to write the shuffling part of this program. And to do that, we're going to first write the code in the main program, and then after that, we'll move that code into a function call rather than keep it in the main program. But sometimes it's helpful when you're not really sure how a function is going to work to put it in the main program and then factor it out or strip it out and put it up in a function call later on. So the first thing we're going to do is we need a couple of constants for the rows and the columns. So we have 4 rows. And we have 13 columns. Oops, I didn't type a semicolon right there. Let's add that in. There we go. Then we need to declare the deck. So we'll call that a two-dimensional array deck. And it consists of rows and columns, just like we initialized. Then we call the initDeck function with deck and rows as its 2 arguments, as per the function definition. So now we have a two-dimensional array, all of zeros. Now we're ready to actually do the shuffling. Here we need 2 variables for a row and column. Then we need to seed the random number generator, which we'll be using in just a moment. So we do that. Now here comes the shuffling part of the program. It consists of a for loop that runs from 1 to 52. So clearly this for loop represents the cards of the deck. And what we're going to do is we're going to find an empty space in the array and assign a card number to that space. So the way we do that is, first of all, we randomly create a row number. So here we call the random number generator function rand mod 4 to give us a row that's in the range of 0 to 3. Notice we're not using the +1 because we want our one possibility to be 0, or the lower end to be 0 and the upper end to be 3 rather than 1 through 4. And then for the column, we'll do the same thing. Rand mod 13, since there can be 0 through 12 possible columns. So once we have a row and column number randomly generated, we check to see if that position is open in the two-dimensional array, in the deck. So we do that by writing an if statement saying if deck row col equals 0, then assign that cell or that position the value of the card, like so. Now, if that position is not open, if it's already been assigned a value, then what we're going to do is, first we have an else part of this, and in the else we write a little while loop that is going to continuously generate random numbers for row and column until it finds a deck row column that is equal to 0. So while deck row col is not equal to 0, generate a new random number for the row and generate a new random number for the column, like so. Then when you've found one, assign it that card value, and you're finished. Close off the else, close off the for. Now we can display the deck with deck and rows, then put a new line at the end to leave a little space so we can see our output, and let's build and run the program. Alright, so there it is. We can find the first card is up in the hearts, if hearts are first. Hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades would be one possibility, although you can set your own order for the suits. And then the 52nd card is there in the third row. Now, before we're finished, we really want to take this code and turn it into a function. So we'll come up to our function area. We'll write a function called shuffle deck. It will take the same arguments that the other functions take, a two-dimensional array and a number of rows. And then we'll just copy the code, starting at int row col, and put it inside the function. So we'll do a Control X and a Control V. We'll have to move over the first line. Now, the only thing we're going to need to do, the only change we need to make is notice that the parameter for the array is named ARR. But in our code, we use deck, so we need to go through the function and change all references to deck to ARR. I'll just do it manually. There's only a couple here, 4 total. One more after this one. And that's probably all we have to change. I say probably because there's a chance there's something else left, but we'll find that when we run the program. So right here, we'll call the function shuffle deck rows. Okay, let's build and run the program again. There's our deck. Let's do it one more time just to make sure. Look for a 1 card and a 52. There's the 1. There's a 52. Assume the other ones are in between. It looks like they are. And that's the function. So here you see how we can use a two-dimensional array to represent a real-life object, a deck of playing cards. Later on in the course, we'll use this function and these other functions to see how to actually deal out a hand in, say, a card-playing game like poker or bridge.